Have you ever sat down with your popcorn and your drink to watch the brand new movie adaptation of your favorite comic book or TV show, and find yourself going back to the source material, wondering who all these new people are and what the hell is happening? That's the fate of TSR's ill-fated Buck Rogers RPG, the one that replaced Star Frontiers, the one that was a clone of 2nd edition D&D, the one that included several questions about conflicts of interest with the head of TSR, a game that had none of the camp of the original series, and none of the charm of the early 80s TV show. It appealed to no one, and is considered one of the major causes of the decline of TSR. I'm Mr. Welch, and on this Mad Musings we are looking at Buck. He'll save every one of us. Back in the distant past of 1988, TSR was run by Lorraine Williams, who was also the granddaughter of John Dilley, the man responsible for turning Buck Rogers into a comic strip. When he died, the rights to Buck passed to the Dilley family trust, of which Williams was a beneficiary. So she decided that Buck Rogers needed to be an RPG. The fact that she got a percentage of everything sold was not lost on people in the industry. But TSR already had a sci-fi game, Star Frontiers. Easy enough, kill Star Frontiers and release Buck Rogers. But which Buck Rogers to go with? The 1939 serials from Universal featuring All-American Adonis Buster Crabbe, Olympic champion, star of stage and screen? Or the 1980s sci-fi series with Gerard, but primarily best known for Aaron Gray's immortal performance as Captain Wilma Deering? The TV show that is fondly remembered even today, probably due to the surprisingly large number of bikini women found in the show. But which one? TSR decided to go with none of them, instead creating their own version of the story with a rather hard sci-fi vibe, despite all the spaceships looking like War Rocket Ajax. All of the action was inside the solar system, but largely restricted to just the first 4 planets in the asteroid belt. There were no aliens, but lots of genetically enhanced humans. Mechanically, the game is a rehash of almost all the 2nd edition rules. It even has Thaco. It adds the tech stat, but the other 6 are identical to D&D. It has saving throws, levels, and of course multiple races. You've got people from the first 4 planets, as well as the moon and the moons of Jupiter, and the Ginnies, or genetically designed races. Well, more genetically designed than every other race, other than the stock humans living on Earth. There are 6 classes: Warrior, Rogue, Rocket Jock, Medic, Scout, and Engineer, which mostly pair up with traditional D&D classes, with a few high-tech exceptions. You have skills specific to each class, and you get 40 skill points to divide up every level, similar to Thief skills back in 2nd edition. There's a pool of general skills, but the class skills can never be bought off-class. So if you want to play a medic who can spot small details, sorry, but that skill is available to everyone but you. There's not much to go over in the rules. Again, they're lifted from 2nd edition D&D without much thought to making a unique rule set for the game. It's much like 3rd edition when people started to discover the D20 system was a terrible generic system. 2nd edition was never intended to be used outside of D&D, and applying it to Buck Rogers made it painfully obvious why this is the case. If you know how to play 1st or 2nd edition D&D, you already know how to play Buck Rogers. It even has the descending armor class scale. There's nothing very original about the mechanics of the game. You've got all the famous Buck Rogers characters. There's Buck, Wilma, Dr. Ewer, Princess Ardala, who looks less like the businesswoman they turned her into and more like a Deja Thoris cosplayer from John Carter of Mars. Sadly, there's no Twiki, no Hawk, no Dr. Theopolis, or Space Gary Coleman to be found in the game at all. But fortunately, there's no sudden change in the plot, so you have to go exploring the cosmos because the producers changed in the middle of the series, and instead of the guy wanting Star Wars on TV, now you got the guy that wants Star Trek on TV. So you've completely flipped the concept of the show, and people stopped watching. Don't ask Gil Gerard about the thematic flip. Trust me, I did. He gets mad. Since I don't have to cover the mechanics, I can just jump straight into the background. All the major NPCs have their own stat card that are separate from the book, so if you want to run into Buck or Wilma, they're right there. If you're thinking about basing a game around a single NPC is a terrible idea, you've been paying attention to this channel. Buck is front and center, and let me tell you, he is amazeballs! But how often are you going to use a DMPC given to you by the maker of the game? You can't have all these characters showing up all the time. But they still made them front and center and reminded us how awesome they were. Instead of just handling them like they did in the Star Trek RPG, where like Leia was with the party, but she was off doing princess stuff in the background and just there to chime in to remind people that she was there. And to kill a specific number of stormtroopers, again to remind people that she was a badass. But she kept out of the spotlight at all other times. Not like Buck, who is intended to be used as early and as often as possible, it seems. This version of Buck uses the original name of Anthony, and he went into space in 1999 to stop a rogue Soviet killsat, but his ship got blasted and he went into cryosleep for 400 years. Same as the last 2 incarnations. Then he defrosts and finds the solar system under control of the Martian corporation RAM. Earth is subjugated, and Venus and Mercury are terraformed with lots of genetically designed humans everywhere. The war for the solar system is split between 2 forces. Neo, the new Earth organization, who are the plucky underdogs fighting a hopeless battle against RAM, the Russo-American mercantile group. Earth had barely escaped nuclear annihilation before Buck became a popsicle and put aside their nukes to work together, settling the solar system. But Earth eventually had a nuclear war, and Ram ended up controlling Mars, and then revolted and starved Earth of all the resources it needed, nuking them again to remind them who was boss. Neo was created to free the solar system from Ram's tyranny, but they were always losing, until Buck showed up. And that's where the party comes in. The characters are going to be operatives of Neo, and while not as awesome as Buck, are expected to handle the crap jobs that he's too awesome to do. They can be regular fighter pilots, soldiers, techs, or medics, but with the skill system they can branch out to be a little bit more specialized in your field. So you can have them be space janitors, space filing clerks, space gardeners, space bailiffs, or even space detectives. You get your gear, and then you go shoot bad guys. There's no aliens, but there's enough genetically designed life forms that there might as well be. I will give them props for that. These guys came up with gene-spliced abominations as shock troops decades before Hunger Games did. There is a real technological divide in how things are presented in Buck Rogers, and it's glaring. You've got things like moving cities on the face of Mars that would look completely at home in the Star Wars universe, but all the spaceships look like the Cyrene Penetrator from Star Control 2. Seriously, Accolade, Crystal Dynamics, whoever owns you now, you need to solve the rights issue for that game so it can be made into a TV show. The plot's already written. On second thought, they'll probably mess that one up like they did Halo. So, never mind. Forget I said anything. The art switches between harsh angles and realistic buildings to 1930s rocket ships. It was one of the major complaints when the game was first released, but considering all the other complaints that followed after reading the game, that's considered a minor one now. One major theme of the game was that of genetic manipulation. It was because of this that humanity was able to adapt to life on other planets, even in space. Getting your genes spliced is commonplace anywhere but Earth, which is a blasted wasteland after multiple wars where the population lives in absolute squalor, under the caring and watchful eyes of their Martian overlords. Most of the nations are gone on Earth, and the original cultures in other worlds are long forgotten. Venus might have been terraformed by the nation of India centuries ago, but after adapting themselves to live on that planet's still hostile environment, they haven't resembled their original human forms in quite some time. Ram has their fingers in most planets' affairs, and since they control trade, they can starve out planets if they get uppity, something that they constantly remind everybody of. A major part of the Buck Rogers setting are the Ginnies. While Mercurians, Venetians, Martians, Lunarians all have genetic manipulation, they're still human in appearance and can interbreed with stock humans. Ginnies were created in labs using DNA spliced with something else, and they can never pass for human, and they can only breed with Ginnies of their own kind. They're hyper-specialized in their role, and many of them can't survive outside the environment they were designed for. Tinkers are space gnomes in description and duty, designed for tunnel work and created with technological knowledge ingrained. They don't have a single piece of art depicting them in the core book. Workers are space cavemen, short, thick, and dumb, but great at following orders. They also don't have any art. Terrines are space psychopaths, created by splicing shark DNA with humans. They're massive, rather dense in every sense of the word, and again, have no art. Of the ones we do have art for, Delphs are dolphin-human hybrids, great at underwater adventures and quickly dehydrating and dying in non-water adventures. Lowlanders are space lizards who live in the toxic environment of the surface of Venus. They can survive in acid clouds, dense atmosphere, and deadly heat with no problem. Of course, they sicken and die outside of it. Desert runners were created with dog and cat DNA to survive on the surface of Mars, though in their only piece of art they strongly resemble Space Frank Zappa but with hairier legs. Something I think Frank would be proud of. Storm Riders are half stingray and fly around the upper atmosphere of Jupiter and can't breathe normal air. Spacers are designed to obviously live in outer space. They don't normally wear clothes, can be easily identified by their silver skin, bulbous eyes, bald head, and their surprisingly impressive buttocks. They also can't speak and die if they don't get enough sunlight. So about half the Ginnies aren't really playable in most campaigns because of their dependency on certain environments. The game produced several products, including source books on all the various planets as well as Neo and numerous modules, 2 gold box games that weren't bad. Impressively enough, the game designers were a who's who of 90s design, including Mike Pondsmith of Cyberpunk fame creating the system, Jim Ward and Kim Mohan, who were TSR heavy lifters and I've mentioned before on this channel, as well as Flint Dilley, who was Lorraine Williams' brother and is best known for helping write the G.I. Joe movie, the animated one back in the 80s, not the live-action abomination. He also created a large number of CDs for Mastara's second edition box sets. Frank Miller named Dilios from 300 after him. There was also a series of novels that were created in multiple modules. The game designers were top-notch. The system was familiar to players and the art was impressive. So what went wrong? For starters, there wasn't a market for Buck Rogers 10 years after the TV show ended, especially one that didn't look anything like the TV show. Most people couldn't pick Buster Crabbe from the 1939 serials out of a police lineup at this point, but the game tried to make it a strange fusion between the two. Everything that people remembered from their childhood about Buck Rogers was missing from the RPG. No Twiki, no Starfighters, the Draconian Empire was absent, and the shrine to everything 80s that defined the show wasn't in the box set. When people thought of Buck Rogers, they thought of Twiki dancing, Hawk brooding, Wilma shooting people, and Princess Ardala seeing how much skin she could show off on broadcast television. Not rocket ships mixed with Mad Max and Outland. Rocket ships were Flash Gordon's territory. Getting Buck Rogers can be difficult. Because of the licensing issues, you won't find it legally on any PDF site. And the licensing is very apparent. You won't find TSR written on the books. Instead, everything is copyrighted Dilly Family Trust. The box sets go for about $100 where you can find them, if you can find them intact. Many of the modules you can find in older game stores still in shrink wrap at regular price, where they've sat there since the early 90s. The setting books go from $30 to $50 used, but there's not really much of a demand for them outside the collector's value. The game was sandwiched between Alternity and Star Frontiers, and few people remember it for good reason. So that wraps up Buck Rogers. Wait a minute. Williams tried again after the first one was canceled early for poor sales, and that one sold even worse, and they still kept making it? That's right, listeners. TSR tried again just years after the failure of the first Buck Rogers. Now they were fully embracing the Buster Crabbe serials. Everybody was back. Buck, Wilma, Ardala, Killer Kane, Dr. Ewer, they were all back. Everybody except Buck's youthful, brave, and inexplicably indestructible sidekick Buddy. Because that's what you need in every good pulp adventure. A fifth grader to follow you around and generally make your life a living hell as he nearly gets you killed countless times because he's a bloody 10-year-old in a war zone. But you can only laugh at his childhood antics because otherwise you're going to be writing a really uncomfortable letter back to his parents explaining why the funeral is going to be closed casket. So on second thought, maybe leaving Buddy out of this was a good idea. The mechanics are pretty simple. There's 4 stats: strength, aim, bronze, and health. You rank them in order, so you go from best, better, good, down to okay. Then you get a skill for each stat and a bonus skill for your best stat. Skills give you an extra die to your die pool. It's an action point system. You get 3 actions on your turn, with some activities taking multiple action points. When you do something, you roll your dice pool, which is your stat level plus 1, plus any skills you might have. Hit the target number and you succeed. You can gain XP chips through play, and you can either spend these to raise skills, but mostly just to improve your die rolls. And now you come to the game world where you have to help the forces of America push out the pugnacious Han army under the control of the Mongol Emperor of North America. That's right, the bad guys are all Chinese. And not just Chinese. 1930s America version of Chinese. Remember, back in the 30s, the Chinese didn't have that big of an army. Come to think of it, they didn't even have the largest army in China at the time. Before WW2, China was known as the place that everybody just liked to show up and conquer. And all the stereotypes are on full display here back in 1993. Buck teeth, slanted eyes, straw hats on everybody. The kind of stuff that would get you fired from most jobs even suggesting anything remotely like this. A large amount of the art is original, done by Dick Calkins, taken straight from the comic book pages. Showing this game to your friends is going to raise a lot of eyebrows. You have been warned. The setting is definitely World War I with ray guns. Buck is an ace pilot fighting with Captain Deering and her motley bunch of heroes, including sky pirates, steampunk Navajo, space cowboys, and the nation of Chile. Well, not space cowboys. This game, unlike the first version, is all on Earth, mostly around Chicago, as Buck tries to chase off the Second Mongolian Empire. You got rocket guns, laser tanks, disintegration cannons, cowboys named the Cyclone Kid and Lariat Luke. And there's not much to the game past the initial box set, unless you count the second adventure box set, War Against the Han. Unless, of course, all your players are Uyghurs, in which case this is going to quickly turn into their favorite game. Buck Rogers in both forms failed. In the case of the cliffhanger game, it failed badly. It wasn't advertised very well, it didn't sell in great numbers, and it was discontinued almost immediately. It didn't help the box set was made with low-quality components. The maps were done on thin cardstock, and the characters were all cardboard cutout standees. Finding a complete box set for the cliffhanger game is like trying to find a pristine 1973 Ford Pinto, and for the same reasons. You can find the box set sealed on sale for a list price if you wait around long enough. There is no demand outside of the die-hard collectors, and even then, this game is just there to fill up shelf space. Okay, let's do something new for the next Mad Musings. I've been stuck in the past, so it's time for the far future. We are headed back to Arrakis to take a look at Modiphius's Entertainment's Dune adventures in the Imperium, to see how they handle the spice. So until then, prepare her for our pleasure.